Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the very first Emergent Leader Live. How are you this morning, Kurt?
I'm doing great.
Well, good. For those of you who are joining us, we are really excited to have some conversations. I think in all kinds of offices and Zoom rooms and phone calls all across the country, we've been having conversations about what leadership looks like right now and in all times of struggle and crisis. And Kurt said, why don't we have some conversations with some folks who have been through our Emergent Leader training and just hear what God is up to in their lives, what they're learning in this time and in all times, and see what we can learn from that. So, Kurt, I am going to, just a couple of things for our folks who are watching. If you're joining us live, we would love to hear from you. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, in either spot, you can go ahead and enter questions or comments there, and we will do our best to respond to those in a couple of moments during this webinar. So please feel free to do that. If you're rewatching it, we of course won't see your comments, but would love to engage with you after. So with all that said, I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Leah Abel, and I am a director of Christian education, as well as a project manager and event planner and facilitator for all kinds of ministry across the Synod. And I'm here with my mentor and friend, Mr. Kurt Bickel, who I will let introduce himself. Kurt.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. It's a wonderful day to be engaged in leadership conversation. And we have two leaders with us today that I think really kind of embody the Emergent Leader process. We have Tina Jason and Dennis Goff. Tina is the consultant and coach. She formed Faithful Innovations, a business she's had for quite a while. She has a lot of variety of background and work in different agencies. And she's, as her website says, she encourages others, and she herself is a forward thinker, a kingdom-minded builder, and a real leader. As her website says, she encourages others, and she attended the very first Emergent Leader event in 2014. And she'll tell you a little bit more about herself as well. And also we have the Reverend Dr. Dennis Goff with us. So Dennis is the ministry program director for the Lutheran Foundation in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Dennis has over 30 years of pastoral ministry, but also served with Lutheran Church Extension Fund and currently with the foundation. Dennis has this ability to share his passion and advocate for innovation in congregations and other organizations as he works with the foundation. And especially he's focused on mental wellness and mental health and sharing how congregations can better raise that awareness within their churches. And we're just really thankful that both of you could carve out some time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So I guess I'll introduce myself. Is that what you'd like?
Well, I thought, yeah, go for it.
Sure. I'm Tina Jason, and as Kurt said, I lead a coaching practice called Faithful Innovation. And what I focus on is helping either congregations, ministries, or faith-based nonprofits start something new, expand what's already working, or realign to their current capacity and the current needs in their community. And we've seen all kinds of new and exciting ministries develop out of that.
And I'm Dennis Goff. As Kurt mentioned, I work at the Lutheran Foundation in Fort Wayne. The Lutheran Foundation was formed from the sale of a Lutheran hospital that was started by Lutheran congregations back in the late 1800s. And that hospital sold and created the foundation, and we are in our 25th year. And primarily, in many ways, we're a grant funding organization for Northeast Indiana. And my role, I have the privilege of working specifically with 92 Lutheran churches, 19 Lutheran schools, about a dozen different Lutheran ministry organizations in Northeast Indiana. And One of the initiatives, one of the areas of focus for us these days is mental wellness, promoting mental wellness and reducing the stigma around mental illness. And we're trying to do that throughout the area, but specifically in the faith community.
Great, great. Yeah, and Leah has some questions for us that we're going to talk about and looking to expand our understanding of how leadership is kind of evolved for you, and as you reflect on leadership in your organizations and your ministries.
Yeah, we're really grateful, Tina and Dennis, that you're here today, especially as former Emergent Leader participants. And one of the questions that we would really love to hear from you about has to do with, as you lead now, what learnings in your leadership journey, and those could be from your time with Emergent Leader and from others as well, but what learnings have been the most impactful for you as a leader? Tina, I'd love to hear from you first on that question.
Thanks, Leah. I think that the key learning I took out of Emergent Leaders that's continued to be a consistent theme in my own leadership and continued growth is learning to be a non-anxious presence in the midst of an anxious system. And we are in times of significant cultural change, which has prompted ministries to need to adjust, nonprofits to need to adjust. And so there's anxiety around that of what do we do? Because sometimes the strategies of the past aren't carrying into the current time. And certainly in this time of a pandemic, we don't know what it's going to look like on the other side of that. So how do we be prepared for that? As a director of outreach, I initially thought what people needed was strategies. And I quickly learned that what was really needed was a better understanding of the context and to have a perspective on that. And then to be able to step into that was maybe a different mindset. And how do we as individuals now step into that? And that's not something someone learns in a snap. It's learning maybe different strategies and behaviors and then trying those out, coming back and gaining awareness and growing step by step. And so I think above anything, that's a key thing I took away. I'm going to hold up a piece that in the workshop we worked through, which was the cornerstone factor. And even though I was leading a different organization at the time, I found that the work that I did in that exercise really helped clarify for me what I was delivering as a leader and then how I was going to deliver it. And it helped me to focus on who was I looking for to lead? Who am I best equipped to lead? Which helped me. That has just helped me tremendously. I wasn't necessarily trying to lead everyone, but some early adopters.
So it sounds like it was more of a process than a here's my magic moment, maybe a few insights from that experience that kind of led you through that process some more.
It was a culminating time where several things I had been working on already came together and was actually part of the key factor in what launched me into coaching, because I started to better understand my own skill set and then what was going to be needed to be able to exercise that well.
Well, I have to tell you, Tina, you and I had a conversation on Tuesday, and what's now Thursday, and it's been running through my head. Your comment about what people need is not strategy has been running through my head for the last couple of days. So clearly, those important things kind of stick. I'd love to hear from you as well. What are some of the learnings that have really stuck with you that are really kind of shaping how you lead right now?
You know, after I started thinking about the experience that we had and in preparation for this, I remember a couple aha moments for me in the training. And the one that stands out the most for me was when we talked about the formula for change. And Kurt, I don't remember if it was you who was leading us through that or one of the other presenters, but just for our audience here, that formula for change is recognizing the dissatisfaction that you might have with the current environment, then creating the vision for how do you respond to that, what are the first steps that you take, and how do you continue to follow through? If all of that together is greater than the resistance that you experience, that will create change. And I remember sitting at our group table when all that was explained, and after the description of it was given, I looked across the table at somebody who I know her ministry situation rather well, and we locked eyes and both said, now this makes sense. Because as you think about, as she was talking about her own ministry environment, and as I think about where I work, as well as churches that I pastored, my gosh, there's always, you always encounter some dissatisfaction with current situations. Mm-hmm. And the challenge often is how do I jump in there to try to create something? And a lot of times, myself included, I jump in without a lot of thought. But, looking at that formula really helped me kind of grasp the fact that there really needs to be some thoughtful attention to creating that vision and next steps, and how do we approach this before we take some of those first steps. And it helped me understand that you can create change. Oftentimes we talk about in the church, if anybody's resistant to change, Christians are, Lutherans are. But actually, we recognize around us that people adapt to change all the time, sometimes with resistance, but people adapt to change. Well, how can we make that more manageable? And that just, light bulbs went off for me for that. And I think I will, I think I want to continue to practice that as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Dr. Sue Easton shared that design. And, it's so real. And the congregations often kind of get stuck. They do some of the first steps, but it's the follow through.
Yeah.
You have churches calling up, and Tina, you probably have this too. They want to do a visioning plan, and that you ask them, do you have one now? Yeah, well, we want to redo it. I said, well, let's look at it. Probably it's the follow through. It's that we haven't stuck to it long enough. And in the church, which is such a sluggish system, it takes years to get those follow throughs to start taking hold and build new culture. Mm-hmm. And that was that's really helpful. And resistance. And the other thing I think about is resistance. We always think that the resistance is in the outside of us. The real resistance is in the leaders, and probably within myself too. Mm-hmm. I don't really want to change. I want to do what's more comfortable. And Tina, your observation really reminds me of the work that's inside out. The more you spend time thinking about and praying and understanding who you are as a baptized child, and when you get that alignment, when like your work, I just watch your work from the sidelines, and it just kind of took off, and it seemed like you just found your niche.
And I think that comes from it. Just thinking about how that came about for me, a lot of introspection, of really understanding myself and understanding where I was best suited to serve. And again, leading, who am I equipped to lead? And I recognized, if I think of sort of a bell curve of a theory of innovation or a change theory, that because I'm at the more visionary end of the spectrum, I really, personally, I scare the people on the back end of the wave. And so I learned, and I think part of the awareness started to come about through the Emergent Leader training, that I'm really best equipped to lead people who are in that early adopter category, who are ready to step in when it's unclear. And so my role as a coach is to walk alongside, helping them figure out what really are their next steps, help them gain awareness in their own context, not tell them how to do it. And of course, I can bring tools and framework and resources that can aid and assist that. But to help facilitate and navigate the process. And as you were saying, there are a lot of places that already have strategic plans that have not been carried through. So in my own practice, I really don't do just strategic planning events because, and my explanation to congregations is that my goal is for you to achieve the result that you want, not just complete the workshop. And often ministry gets talked to death or it dies on the vine when there's enough challenges that there's not perspective or stamina to get through to have that breakthrough of what it's really going to take. And so the tools that I use take sort of the best practices of entrepreneurial development in the language of ministry, because I found that the entrepreneurial world had business language, but it didn't fit ministry very well. And I sort of put those two things together. And one of the organizations that I coach within is 52. That is a startup incubator system. 52.com is where you can find them. And 52 also takes really good entrepreneurial development practices. And then we as coaches walk alongside the teams as they're developing for a couple of years.
Yeah.
That's some exciting stuff, Tina. I wanted to share Tina's email address at the bottom. If some of what she's saying is resonating with you and you'd like to have maybe some more conversation, you can reach her there at tina@faithfulinnovation.com. Would love to hear your thoughts as you guys continue to sort of seek what leadership looks like, because as we all know, this is a process. I mean, I think, Tina, you said that really well all along, but I'm wondering what your journey looks like right now a bit. Dennis, where are you right now? Where are you continuing to seek growth and improvement in yourself as a leader?
You know, the training experience is very humbling in many ways, because you like to think that along the way in life, at times you've mastered certain things. And I remember early on in my, earlier in my ministry, not necessarily early on, one coworker said to me, probably the best compliment I think I ever heard was, Dennis, I really think one of your strengths is you're a good listener. And that's something I've always tried to be conscientious about and give attention to. But I have to say that when we did the session on active listening as a part of the Emergent Leader training, I learned a lot of things about listening that I thought I knew and I thought I was practicing, and maybe I was to a certain degree, but this really sharpened it for me. And, you know, as you talk about continuing to seek growth and improvement, I think for me, the bottom line is to be a stronger, better, more attentive, mature listener. And all too often, it's easy for me to focus on how do I want to respond, as opposed to focusing on how am I best understanding what the person is saying. And I too went through some coaching direction over the last year, and that is a significant part of that, is to be that active listener. And in the coaching process, not to tell somebody what they're supposed to do, but to guide them by asking a series of questions and responding to what they're saying. And if we're not attentive to what they're saying, then it's really hard to carry out that role as a coach. So again, I'll go back and say that I'd like to think at this point in life, I've mastered everything I need to know about listening, but the reality is I haven't. And so that's a continued growth for me. But I really do appreciate the exercises that we had as a part of our session on being an active listener.
Yeah, I think I forgot to mention that Dennis was in the last group that just finished up. In fact, finished up right before COVID.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's kind of the nice juxtaposition we have here with Tina being in the first group and Dennis in the last group. And just curious too about that, from your perspective, that continued growth. Obviously, Tina, you know, 6 years. There's a lot of growing that you continue to do.
The coach training for me started about the same time as Emergent Leader. I didn't look it up to see exactly when, but at this point now, over 150 hours of training and over 650 hours of coaching individuals and teams, and really consistently learning to be a good listener, because to be a coach, a good coach really requires that empathy with whomever I'm listening to, and to listen deeply, not just what somebody's saying, but really what are they saying in their whole body. And it's interesting, even on the phone, you can hear subtle differences when you're attuned to that and can step into that. Um, I'm an avid reader, so just constantly reading leadership materials and trying to look at how do I help someone have an aha of a concept. And just over the weekend, I was preparing for a session that I led last night with a group and overlaid an outward mindset concept in a business book with the parable of the Good Samaritan. And it was a significant aha for the people in the group that allowed them to look at what they were doing through a different lens. So I don't think I could do what I do without just a consistent practice of growth.
Yeah. Well, in your preparation, that, we sometimes talk about, people tell me that I'm, really in the moment, innovative and intuitive. And I go, yeah, and I prepared. It's like I prepared to be in the moment. In fact, perhaps the underlying skill that both of you are referring to in listening is really that thing we talk about a lot in Emergent Leader, is being in the moment, being fully present. And if I'm, Dennis, you thought about, how am I going to respond to this? When you're more in the moment and you're just willing to take one moment at a time and create this space with this other person that you share kind of in that moment, then you're not thinking ahead and you're not lagging behind, because you're really focused on what's happening in this moment as God blesses it. So I think there's a more fundamental skill that's about self-management, that you're allowed to be present, fully present and available. And then
Kurt,
yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Would you be willing to say a little more about that? Because I think that concept of self-management, which is such a big piece of the Emergent Leader training, and we're talking about the importance of it a bit, but how, can you talk a little bit about some of the practices of that, of getting yourself in the moment and being there, that have been maybe successful for you or for others that you've trained through?
Yeah, so I kind of chuckled at Tina's many hours she spent, because she's a World Federation coach certified and associate level, and just getting that certification is hours and hours. And the some of the things that Gestalt uses is more about breathing, body awareness, self-awareness, all of the wonderful things that the ancient Christians practiced in the Jewish traditions of meditation, is really about being in the moment with God, and being aware of your body, being aware of your breathing is a really, really significant part of centering and being grounded and being in the moment. That's one practice. The other one is I smile. I smile a lot. When you smile and your face has a smile, your body says, "Oh, it must be okay." and that it's kind of just a simple physiological thing that we don't remember, is to just. And I wish, by the way, this is just a little pet peeve here, I wish pastors would smile more when they preach. It's like, this is happy, wonderful stuff. Even when you tell the law, it's serious, and it's joy to know the truth. And so anyway, just those are a couple techniques. There's also some neurological programming that you can do if you're interested in having touch points on your body that you can stimulate in order to be more present. So I used to have a stone that I rub between my fingers when I wanted to calm down, when I was breathing. And now if I just do this, it also helps calm down and center, because I've trained my body to see this as a practice of comfort and center.
Kurt, if I can just add too, in all the experiences that we had, each day we got together and you'd have us in the circle and we do some of the things that you were just talking about, the breathing and be aware of your body. And that's not stuff we generally are taught. And many of us haven't experienced. But I found myself, as I did that for a number of days, saying, gosh, I think worship could look a lot different if we started out that way. And all too often in our tradition, you walk in and a prelude's playing and you're hearing this music, you sit down and before you know what's happening, the prelude has stopped and the pastor starts speaking and I don't even have my coat off and my bulletin's not open yet. And I'm not fully there. And so I think the experience could be tremendously different. Kind of a funny story. I have a ministry colleague here in town who has experienced a lot of the things that you talked about, the whole breathing thing. And she has said to me several times, Dennis, you need to learn how to breathe. And I say, I don't know how to breathe. It's something we should know. But I found myself, my son got married 2 years ago, and I was the one who did the wedding. And I'll talk about a non-anxious presence. I was an anxious presence that day. But I'll tell you what, that breathing came to mind, and I was really focused on that before I walked in there.
Cool.
Made a huge difference.
And I find, so within my coach training, we talk about there's sort of 3 areas of listening. One is to the internal conversation. 2 is to the conversation we're having with whomever's in front of us. And 3rd is a Holy Spirit conversation going on. Mm. And so to be able to just be aware in my own body and awareness of those 3 conversations are happening simultaneously. And there's times I have to work really hard at attending to the conversation in front of me because the other 2 conversations can get a little loud.
That's a great way of putting that. That's a great way to see that.
Yeah, I wonder, how many of us, in this last year, have found ourselves trying to lead through something that's just so unknown, and that anxiety that kind of bubbles up, and you want to have answers, and people are asking for you to have an answer, and you don't have an answer, and what that looks like to be present and be listening. And lead with the listening rather than lead with the answers, even when people seem to be pushing for you to provide them.
Mm-hmm.
Leah, as you talk about that, I had an experience along those lines just the other day. Our foundation is trying to gather some data on all the congregations in our area. And so my administrative assistant is calling many congregations, and I'm calling some pastors and talking to them. And I called a pastor the other day, basically because I had a few questions I wanted him to answer, and it was my agenda. And I just started out by, how are you doing? How are things going in the congregation? And he took it from there, and we talked for a greater than an hour after that. And I never really got to ask the other questions, but it didn't matter, because I realized early on in the conversation, this was much more about him than it was me. And it provided the opportunity for him to share some things. And for me to, just in terms of this whole active listening, I found that I was more dialed in to what his needs were and what he was expressing and the journey that he was having, much more dialed into that than the questions that I had in front of me. Mm-hmm. And when we finished the phone conversation, I went back to my sheet, and I didn't really even ask the questions, but he sure gave me enough information that I had information. Mm-hmm. But even more so, it created a deeper connection that I have with him than I didn't have before, and a prayer partnership that I never expected. So you don't know what can surface at times.
It makes me think that progress really gets made at the speed of trust. And when we provide that space with people, it encourages trust and then allows whatever's going to happen on the other side of that to happen more effectively.
Yeah, I hear teams that are getting stuck or in conflict, and we work. The issue always is that trust issue, Tina, and we stop trusting each other, and we it's in the cornerstone factor. We talk about that trust is really the end result of some real basic things, and the first is just good guidelines, good orientation about what, how are we supposed to be with one another, which is what we do in the Emergent Leader with guidelines. And then second is just expanding that listening opportunity and dealing with the fact that we all need to control. We have this issue of wanting to control. But if you work through those control issues, then you arrive at trust. But so sometimes those building blocks aren't there. We say we don't trust each other, but there hasn't been guidelines. There hasn't been openness. And until someone gets honest, there's no trust there. So, and creating that in a coaching session has similar kind of things. Here's the parameters. And I'm going to be open with you. I'm going to allow you to be open with me in a confidential, caring way. Yeah.
If somebody won't say it, I can't coach it.
Right.
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah. Silence assumes agreement too.
It does. Well, I really hate to try to wrap up this conversation. I feel like we're just getting started. But we're at 30 minutes and we want to try to keep things relatively short for folks. Again, I wanted to let you know if you'd like to connect with any of the folks here, you can reach Kurt here at kurtbickel.com. You can connect with Dennis. This is his email address with the Lutheran Foundation, and Tina as well. And the thing that unites the four of us on the screen right now is our time with Emergent Leader, and want to let you know that we're not sure what the future looks like quite yet as far as the next training courses that will be coming, but we are in the midst of those conversations now. And wanted to let you know that on the 17th, so in about 2 weeks, we'll be having another one of these live webinars. And this time, I think I might just have to turn off my camera and microphone because I don't think that I can probably manage all four of our trainers because they have so much to say and so many things to contribute. We'll have Les Stroh, Daryl Picant, and Dr. Sue Easton with Kurt and myself as well on the 17th. Dennis and Tina, thank you for joining us today, and thanks for sharing just about what God has shown you and what God is teaching you as a leader in this time. Kurt, anything you'd like to share as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I'd like to say that you can find Leah at leahable.com.
That is true. I forgot about myself. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. And again, if you're watching this as a recording, please feel free to share. And we're just so happy to have been able to share this time with you. Be well.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.